The key question which this book addresses is this: is the earth really just 6,000 years old, as many conservative Christians believe? Or is it really 4,500,000,000 years old, as the vast majority of scientists believe? It's a big difference, almost 1,000,000 times different. Unfortunately, many pastors and other church leaders do not have the scientific background to match their theological background, and thus are ill prepared to address such questions. Also, they have not had available very easy to absorb material to explain the issue from a perspective that appreciates both the Bible's account of these matters and the scientific findings about the age of the earth. This short book attempts to fill the need for approachable material on this subject. If you work through the questions and other items herein, you should be far better informed on this key issue of the age of the earth. Further steps, including how to deal with the evolution versus creation issue, are only lightly dealt herein. We cannot claim to resolve all Genesis issues in one short book. The same goes for the moon god, that some worship, the gods of the sea, the air, etc. The matter of how long this creation took would probably have been a very secondary issue, if that. There would have been little reason for them to think that God was in a big hurry to create earth. After all, they were spending 40 years in the desert, just so the older generation could die out and be replaced by a new, braver generation. Many books and websites are devoted to one side or the other of this book's main issue and related topics. But this book is a little different in that it focuses on asking you questions about Genesis, then discussing the matter. This approach is intended to encourage you to think for yourself about a question before reading the, quote, answer. I believe this is a better, faster, and more engaging way to learn about this multifaceted issue. We call the discussion after each question hints, etc. The hints may include further questions or considerations, or references, or technical details, or quotes, or, of course, proposed answers, or, in some cases, rather firm answers. Please don't subvert the thinking process by jumping to the hints section right away. To remind you to think before going on to each hints section, we always begin the hints on the next page after the question. Question 2.7. What do you think the scripture means when it says, quote, the evening and the morning were the first day, unquote, as if the whole earth experienced evening and the whole earth experienced morning? Hence, etc. Note that Moses uses this evening and morning terminology for each of the 6 days of creation, whether sunlight is present or not. And recall that in question 2.4 we noted that only about half the earth can experience daylight or darkness at any moment. So what is the intended meaning? One possibility in the first day is that Moses is simply referring to the time before God created light as evening or darkness, and the time after he created light as morning. If so, how long was this evening before he created light? Did time even exist before light was created? It might be that in each day, evening refers to an unstructured primordial state of some aspect of the world, while morning refers to a mature, beautiful result of that, quote, day's work. Some might say Moses is speaking of evening and morning in some particular place, such as Jerusalem. But did Jerusalem's site exist during the first 2 days of creation? No. Well, did the Eurasian continent exist at that time? Well, no. Was there anything that could be identified meaningfully as a place on the earth during days 1 and 2? Even scientifically ignorant people at the time of Moses could see that the first 3 days could not have been regular sundown till sundown days if sunlight wasn't present. It appears there is no case for day 1 being 24 hours long, other than simply believing that, quote, yom means that, and there is scant evidence for that claim, and days 2 and 3 seem to be in the same situation. Question 3.3. Genesis 1 verse 9 says, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, unquote. Are all the waters of the earth in one place? Is this verse trying to describe the layout of the waters of the earth? If not, what is the verse saying? Going to hints, etc. Clearly, all the bodies of water on the earth are not in one place as we would ordinarily use that phrase. The original audience of Israelites had minimal knowledge of the world map, and indeed their world consisted mostly of the Middle East, northern Africa, and parts of Asia. But even they would have known about various seas, the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea, and maybe others. So they would not have taken the phrase one place to mean one body of water any more than we would today. Focusing on exact wording may cause us to miss the point of what the authors, God and Moses, of Genesis are trying to convey, first to the Israelites and second to a very broad later audience encompassing many languages, cultures, and location, that the one holy God created the entire world in an orderly fashion. In this case, he apparently just means that after this divide, there were definite areas of dry land and definite seas and lakes. Question 4.2. Try to think of places in the Bible which flat earthers might have thought were clear evidence that the earth was flat. Do you think these passages are serious evidence that the earth is flat? Going to hints, etc. The Bible speaks of the four corners of the earth in Isaiah 11 and Revelation 7. It also speaks in many places of, quote, the end of the earth, or the ends of the earth. For example, such phrases occur in Deuteronomy 13 and 28 and at places in Psalms and Isaiah. Are those passages really trying to describe the geometry of the earth? Or are they figures of speech incidental to the writer's points? Were flat earthers seriously looking for geometric information in the Bible, or just jumping onto a passage that superficially seemed like it supported their opinion? The analogy to today's issue of the age of the earth is so obvious, it needs no further discussion. Objection 6.1. Doesn't Noah's flood explain how all the geologic layers and the fossils in them came to be? Reading portions of my response. First, the Bible itself refutes that idea. Genesis 2:14 mentions four rivers that were the headwaters for Eden: the Pishon, the Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. While it is unclear what modern named rivers correspond to the Pishon and Gihon, the Tigris and Euphrates have been important rivers since Genesis 1. The Euphrates in particular is mentioned many times in the Bible. The point is that after Noah's flood, the Tigris and Euphrates continued to be mentioned as if nothing changed. Consider the Grand Canyon, which is often referred to in these discussions. Some young Earth creationists claim that the fossils and obvious evidence at various levels of the Grand Canyon were laid down during the flood, and then the draining away of the flood waters caused the erosion that created the canyon. But there are problems with this claim. First, the layers of fossils bear no resemblance to the way they should be. That is, large animals might be on the bottom, then smaller ones, etc. But there is no simple layering by animal size or density or some such. Secondly, a careful study of the layering of the Grand Canyon shows that the land which has been eroded to create the canyon was built up by being covered by the seas for long periods, at least 7 completely different times, not one. Thirdly, the fossils in those layers are of animals that had not lived for long before Noah, whereas no fossils in those layers exist of the animals Noah would have known well: sheep, goats, lions, rabbits, horses. This suggests that the layers all predate Noah's flood. Refusal of young Earth creationists to look carefully at the physical evidence and instead just plunge on to wrong conclusions is an example of what I call intentional ignorance, as discussed in the appendix on logic. That is, if one simply looks closer at the geological data, the idea is quickly seen to be very wrong.